Good evening and welcome, everybody. It really is a privilege to join you here tonight, to share this room and to be in this space. We have just come from maybe a block over or an ocean over, from refugee camps to, halls of decision making. And tonight, we sit and stand shoulder to shoulder, really united by a common purpose, and that is to shape the future of refugee protection. This dialogue's purpose is to really reflect candidly and engage candidates around trust building and power, and surface their commitments and values and vision for how they will really reimagine and strengthen UNHCR responsiveness and center refugee leadership in that response. This is also very much a historic night. For the first time ever, we're shifting the conversation from the kind of closed doors that we're used to in this space to an open dialogue, to this first of its kind public dialogue with candidates for the UN High Commissioner's office. It was refugee leaders who convened it, so it's really a double historic moment, and it really creates an opportunity to talk about how we show up in this moment. There are many who are showing up already. Our space was created as a global initiative to support meaningful involvement of refugees in global spaces. I also want to thank our seat, whose goal is to transform refugee inclusion from token consultation to structural power. Refugees International, the Zolberg Institute, and the United States Refugee Advisory Board that I'm a part of. We are also hosting this event supported by the Hilton Foundation, Porticus, and Robert Bosch for supporting this incredible event, and also Harvard Club for being in this space. I also want to thank the audience for showing up to an event like this in such a difficult and complicated week to schedule. Also, the RLOs across the world who sent in questions that helped inform this dialogue today and co-create the purpose for this event. I also want to thank the candidates who've joined us here today to inform this dialogue and to also share their vision for the future of UNHCR, especially during this UNGA week. In this room, we have people who represent states, philanthropy, civil society, the private sector, refugee communities who each play a role in shaping the future, and the stakes could not be higher and hotter. We are living through the largest displacement crisis in recorded history. The protection space is shrinking. Resources are running dry. Anti-refugee rhetoric is getting louder. Across the world, hard decisions are being made about borders, about budgets, about values and lives. Moments like this are heavy, and they are also full with possibility if we meet them with courage. Hard moments shape the future, but they also shape us, and they reveal who we are. Let me explain very briefly. As a child, I once came home, and across the way, I saw my friend's grandfather. He was there sitting with military officials, and he was pointing to our house, and I wondered why. One of the things that I realized later is that they came over and had a bucket with red paint in it. They painted our gate with a red X. From that moment, we realized that we were in danger. As I was trying to process why would somebody who I've known my whole life decide to do something like this, my father said something really interesting. It's a proverb. Ne pada sneg da pokrije breg, nego da svaka zverka pokaže svoj trag. That really means that snow's purpose isn't to cover the hill. It is to reveal the tracks of animals. And one of the meaning of that is to say that in the difficult of moments, in the hard times like storms, the purpose isn't to hide. It is to reveal how we act. They reveal how we show up, how we move. I want to invite everyone to engage in this moment with courage and transparency and action so that when we look back at this moment, our tracks, together we are proud how we showed up. Upcoming, we'll have the moderated dialogue and audience Q&A and reception to follow. And for now, I'd love to introduce the video intervention by Nicole Demoore, who will be joining us here on video.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, my sincere apologies for not being able to join you in person tonight. As a member of parliament in Belgium, I had to attend the opening of the parliamentary year. Still, I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my thoughts and to answer some of your important questions. And of course, I remain open for dialogue with all of you after today. Now, more than ever, the international protection system is under pressure, and UNHCR must remain capable of delivering on its core mandate of protection, assistance, and sustainable solutions. And this conviction is what motivated me to be a candidate for the position of High Commissioner. Now, the current High Commissioner and his team have already had to make tough choices to function with fewer resources. And in the short term, that path must continue, with decisions always guided by the needs in the field. But we also need to look ahead. How should UNHCR evolve in the next 10 years? How should it be financed? How should it be organized within the wider UN system in order to safeguard its mandate? And my ambition is to rebuild the organization so that it is agile and fit for purpose, ready for today's and tomorrow's challenges. Now, for the first 2 years, I see 3 priorities: resources, UNHCR's place in the UN system, and support for host communities. First, on resources. UNHCR is not only facing less funding, but is also facing increasingly earmarked funding, which makes it difficult to respond flexibly to urgent needs. So we need more predictable and more diversified funding with stronger partnerships, not only with governments, but also with private actors, with development banks. Donors must be encouraged to increase their core contributions. But new partnerships can also help to shape sustainable responses, for example, such as labor market integration. Now, second, UNHCR's role in the UN reforms. UNHCR can strengthen its cooperation with other humanitarian agencies, with development actors. I really believe UNHCR can play a leadership role in shaping these reforms that will improve the efficiency of the whole UN system. And third, support for host communities. Most refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries. It is crucial that humanitarian aid benefits not only refugees, but also local populations. And by working with development banks, for example, and new partners, UNHCR can also help to strengthen basic services, such as education, healthcare. This creates benefits for all residents of the country. Now, I also want to highlight the role of refugees themselves, because refugees should not only be seen as beneficiaries of aid, but as true agents of change. Refugee-led organizations are already delivering solutions, are already building resilience in their communities. And as a minister in Belgium, I cooperated with refugees when we were working on our national pledges for the Global Compact on Refugees. As High Commissioner, I would support and involve the organizations, as well as individual experts, as true strategic partners, through regular consultations, for example, and through direct and flexible funding. I've witnessed myself during my visits how their initiatives, whether it be child-friendly spaces, vocational training, or financial literacy programs, how these initiatives can really empower both refugees and host communities alike. So to conclude, these are unprecedented times, and we must shift from short-term crisis response to longer-term sustainable solutions in line with the Global Compact on Refugees. And this is not a change of mandate. This is a commitment to be more effective and more forward-looking. The world needs hope, needs humanity, and needs principles that endure, even in times of crisis. And my ambition is to give refugees, stateless and displaced people not only protection, but also perspective. And it would be an honor for me to pursue this mission together with UNHCR and its partners. Thank you.
Rez Gardi is an international lawyer, award-winning human rights advocate, and a global leader in the refugee movement. Born in a UN refugee camp and resettled to New Zealand, Rez went on to become the first Kurd in history to graduate from Harvard Law School. She is the co-managing director of RSEAT, where she works to embed refugee participation and co-governance in the highest levels of decision-making. She's always pushing the system to be more inclusive, more just, and more courageous. Please join me in welcoming Rez.
Good evening, and thank you, Ida, for grounding us so powerfully in your opening remarks. As you've highlighted, this is a historic moment. The first time refugee leaders are convening candidates for the next High Commissioner in this way. Facing political hostility and a collapsing humanitarian system, the appointment of the next United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees will shape the future of protection and solutions for millions worldwide. I'm honored to be moderating this dialogue during the UN General Assembly side events on behalf of Our Space, a refugee-led forum that shifts the conversation away from state-centric frameworks towards solutions grounded in lived experience and partnership. At Our Space, refugee leaders work in collaboration with foundations, INGOs, academia, and policy thought leaders, building spaces that push past tokenism toward genuine influence and co-governance for better responses. My role as moderator is to guide this dialogue, keeping refugee priorities at the center. The questions you will hear tonight were drafted and shaped by refugees, and through a survey of refugee-led organizations and our broader refugee leadership ecosystem, refugee leaders themselves voted on which questions mattered most, ensuring that the dialogue tonight reflects the most pressing challenges facing forcibly displaced communities. And so I'm very excited to introduce to the stage our candidates for the next High Commissioner for Refugees. Of course, not all the candidates, but we're very grateful to have you all here with us tonight. And so I will not go through their bios, which are very impressive and long, but you all have a copy of the program for you to read their bios as I introduce them to the stage. So firstly, I would like to call to the stage Madame Mayor Annen Hidalgo, Mayor of Paris. Miss Christine Schraner, Burgener, former State Secretary for Migration in Switzerland, wherever you like. Miss Niels, Annen, former Minister of State, Federal Foreign Office of Germany. Stage. And Mr. Matthew Crentsil, UNHCR representative in Uganda. So thank you again to each of you for joining us in a very busy week. We know all the different events happening and competing for time, so we're honored that you chose to spend the evening with us answering questions by refugee leaders. So with that, I would like to begin our conversation. The first question that I have, and I will start in this direction first, and then we'll change the order later. Amidst the severe financial shortfalls, notably the United States cuts, the political hostility we're seeing, and a collapsing humanitarian system, what will be your top 3 priorities in your first 2 years to ensure that UNHCR remains both relevant and impactful? Over to you, Mr. Crentsil, first.
Thank you, Rez, and good evening to you all. First of all, I would start, I will prioritize funding. I mean, funding, I'll be referring to funding as the grease that oils our wheels. In this era of financial meltdown, funding for refugee programs and aid programs generally going down, it is imperative that we prioritize this in the next 2 years. Whenever there is a shortage of funding, there is a knee-jerk reaction. That is, let's look for money. But that is not the end of it. Looking for money is one of the ways to increase funding. Also, efficiencies, minding what you do with that money is very, very important. Oftentimes, I've run these programs for 31 years. The leakages are unacceptable. Sometimes it's heartbreaking to see that donor resources go down the drain, not for the purposes for which they have been given. So I would prioritize funding, but within funding, I would make sure that I'm efficient and productive so that funding is used judiciously. Also, under funding, one has to look at the sources of the funding. Often, we have relied too much on a few donors. Sometimes it seems as if funding of refugee programs is a preserve of, let me say, the European countries and also North American countries. But then we have to broaden this base. UNHCR receives only about 3% of its funding from the assessed contributions. We have to have a dialogue. Every time a donor is given money, they think that UNHCR may have its own core funding, and what they are given is supplementary, but that is not the case. UNHCR funding comes from voluntary contributions. We have to look at this critically. I would also look at what we do. UNHCR is not like other agencies or many other agencies that deal with thematic areas, health, education, water, and sanitation. We deal with refugees, human beings who need some of everything. But can we do everything, or we need to refocus on what we can do best? Where are our comparative advantages? What business would we have doing constructing roads when we don't have money for registration, when we don't have money for core activities, refugee status determination, protection, registration, birth certificates? So our focus, my priority will be to refocus on what UNHCR is best placed to do, and then leave the rest or negotiate, coordinate the other activities with those who are best placed to do those activities. Then thirdly, with whom do we work? We often work with NGOs. NGOs are excellent, and UNHCR is an expert in emergency response. But then it goes way beyond that. I'll look at possibilities of working with refugee-led organizations and also harness the already existing systems that are there in the countries, meaning working with the local governments. Localization will be a top priority for me. So to sum it up, the oil that, the grease that oils our wheels, what we are going to do, how we are going to do it, with whom, all aimed at ensuring that refugees are self-reliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Annen.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for that great initiative. And I'm very heartened to see so many people listening to us today. I want to try to answer the question and name three aspects. But let me first of all say that I think all of you at this stage are motivated by the basic impulse to protect what has been built over many, many generations. And so, of course, I agree. There is no UNHCR if we don't address the funding crisis. And no High Commissioner would be able to ignore that. So we are seeing that we lost staff over the last month. The funding crisis is real. UNHCR, like all UN organizations, cannot borrow money. So the consequence is that the organization today is already being diminished. And so it's going to be very important to continue a focused reform process. UNHCR needs to be more efficient and agile. A lot has already been done, but I think it's also important within the organization to keep a balance and to look what really matters in the field. That would be a priority. I have no blueprint for that. I also want to be very honest, because every organization right now is looking to broaden its donor base. And I for sure will be doing that. There's no alternative for that. but there's no easy way to access new funds. But what is clear is that relying on one big donor and a couple of significant donors is not a model for the future. What I want to also name is that I see with a certain concern, especially in times of crises, that there is a danger that we divide the international community in donor countries and host countries. That should not happen, because donors are important and we need donors. And by the way, we also should not give up trying to convince the United States to keep their engagement with UNHCR. It's hard, but it's not impossible. But many countries who are not in the focus, who have been generously opening their borders and supporting refugees, are making maybe even a bigger contribution than including my country, who has been a generous donor for UNHCR. And I believe a country that is both a donor and a host country maybe can make a contribution towards that. And I don't know how much time I have left, but I really want to say that a High Commissioner, whoever that is going to be, has a responsibility to protect the 51 Geneva Convention, the Refugee Convention, and the basic structure of protection that has been built over so many years. Yes, we have a funding crisis, and it's serious, but there is severe political pressure. And I do think that if UNHCR, the office of UNHCR, but the High Commissioner, is able to build alliances, is able to address a broader public, and is able to include those voices who matters the most, and that are the refugees themselves, then there's always an opportunity. Because I can tell you that in my country, political dynamics are also shifting. But if you ask people, do they want to see their government acting in a generous way, supporting people in need? The answer is usually yes. And that's why I'm, in spite of everything, optimistic, and I think the next High Commissioner can make a contribution in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burgener?
Yes, my first priority would be really to concentrate on the core business, that's protection. If we are having a time of difficult situation, constrained financially and also pressure, politically felt in any countries, even in Europe, then clearly we have to concentrate on the core business protection. And to make this more efficient would be my wish. And I could learn from my experience. I was the Secretary of State on migration, so I was responsible for all migrants coming to Switzerland. And I know that even in difficult times, we find solutions. And when I started as a Secretary of State, 7 weeks later, the war in Ukraine started. I was confronted with more than 100,000 Ukrainians coming to Switzerland, beside 24,000 asylum seekers from other countries. And I realized that if we find new solutions, new ideas with courageous, like I invented that people can stay in private households, I could find places for 60% of the Ukrainians in private households. Clearly, it was for Ukraine people. I wished it would be also possible for Afghan people in Switzerland. But there is room and space where we can have innovation. And in Switzerland, we had a new asylum law since 2019, which is very fast. That means we have 6 asylum centers where under one roof you have everything: healthcare, education, procedures. And those procedures by law must be in 140 days gone. And then there is a decision. And clearly, if there is an asylum seeker, has an asylum and can go to a canton or to a province, then must be integrated very quickly, that the social cohesion will be also stable. And the others who don't get asylum, we have really to send them back if they don't have a problem. So the non-refoulement principle is very important. This is a must to always accept this this principle. But we should be really more speedy in the decisions, and that I could advocate to the member states. As a former diplomat of over 30 years, I have a big network where I can also try to build bridges. A second priority would be the tackle the root causes of the migration and refugee flows. And this would mean that I would try to find bridges to other entities in the UN to create synergies and to find solutions on the conflicts. And that I learned as a special envoy on Myanmar. I lived almost 3-4 years in Myanmar in a conflict area, and I realized that you need somebody who has an overview. So I would like to work closely with special envoys of the UN, but also listen to the people on the ground, listen to the refugees. What I did, I went around 7 times to Cox's Bazar, the biggest camp, where I spoke especially also with women, where you have an access only as a woman, and then you can really feel what they expect, what they want. And clearly all these costs. So I would also try to find new financial sources, like with the member states. I would try to influence them to advocate that it's in their interest, also about security, and to find new sources like other Gulf states or regional international banks, banking system, the World Bank. I also worked with the World Bank in Myanmar, and we could make investment in Myanmar like infrastructure, which is also in the interest of the refugees. So these three priorities together can only be fulfilled together with the NGOs, and I worked always with the NGOs in my life, and this is my wish that I can contribute to the protection of the people who are in need. And for those who are not in need, we have to find solutions that we can find acceptance in the society.
Thank you. And Mayor Hidalgo?
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you for this historical meeting. But first of all, I want to tell you why I am candidate for this position. I know that to be a High Commissioner for Refugee is not a position like another. And my motivation came from my own story. My grandfather was a refugee in France during the Spanish Civil War, and unfortunately he decided to go back to Spain because the conditions in France were so hard for the Spanish refugees, and he was arrested, sentenced to death, and after that my family had to migrate from Spain to France when I was 2 years old. And this story is my energy. And today I want to bring my energy, my story, my experience as mayor of Paris to the high mission dedicated to protect the refugees around the world. And to succeed in this very bad situation for the UN, for multilateralism, my conviction and experiences are that we have to build coalitions and to cooperate more and more and in all the level. Coalition with goodwill states, with goodwill organizations and people and cities. And I prepare my candidacy also like a bridge between the North and the South. I come from Europe. I'm supporting by my country, by Spain, my both countries, but also by head of state from the south, like Lula, because I want to build this bridge between north and south. And in these issues about refugees, very important because of course, in the north, we have also to face refugee crisis and welcoming these refugees, but the most important displacement were in the south. But my priority, first of all, I will defend the 1951 Convention. It is the cornerstone of UNHCR and humanitarian operation in this very hostile time and narrative. And many people, some people comment before that a meeting today about the convention was on the table. We have to defend and to protect this convention because it's the cornerstone. Of course, like my colleagues and friends here, my first priority is to find new donors for the refugees issue that could benefit for UNHCR as well as for international, national, and local NGOs. For me, it's all the system who need new donors. How? Enlarging the number of donor countries, asking more to the global north, European Union, and all the OECD's countries, developing new partnership with World Bank, NDBs, etc., creating new tools to finance humanitarian operation. For example, one idea could be to launch solidarity bonds as what has been done with the green bonds for climate. As mayor of Paris and since 12 years, I'm leading and I'm member of coalition of policy makers with mayor, international organization, businesses, artists, civil society. We did a lot together about climate, and I want to bring these skills and these networks to the refugees. I want to use these networks for a global and strong fundraising led by UNHCR with NGO. This is my priority, but we have to continue this discussion.
Thank you. And in each of the responses, I think there has been a number of pressing challenges that have been brought up. Funding, of course, cooperation, protecting the Refugee Convention, which is one that I think is incredibly timely, especially today, as many in this room may have likely attended an event focused on the global asylum system and potential changes or limiting, narrowing those protection frameworks, and in particular a statistic that stayed in my head was about the number of those claiming refugee status not being genuine refugees and the emphasis on people abusing the system. And so we know that certain member states are increasingly using hostile rhetoric, questioning the relevance of the 1951 Refugee Convention or its application and the Global Compact on Refugees. And so as High Commissioner, how would you respond to such narratives and work to safeguard these international protection frameworks, which each of you have addressed in your responses already? Maybe I will go to, this time, start from the middle, and I'll go to Mr. Annen.
Yeah, thank you. And indeed, very, very timely, of course. I think the side event that happened today, I had no opportunity to listen to the discussions, but it's just one aspect out of many. And I agree that the system in general is very much under pressure. So I would join my colleagues here on the panel and to repeat that I think it's a core task for the next High Commissioner to defend the 51 Convention. And I also think it can be done because the Convention has been very successful. And it is the bedrock for protection, and it still also enjoys a lot of support. So one aspect is to build alliance and to make that support more visible. So that's a genuine responsibility for a High Commissioner to maintain that political context, to build political context. But would that mean to not be willing to discuss with critics? I would say no. And UNHCR has been doing that before. I mean, I think it was in 2007 when a 10-point plan has been presented, where a lot of discussion has already been organized. So if we want to maintain the political and the donor support from key countries, a High Commissioner needs to be ready to listen, ready to engage, and in some cases also ready to explain what the 51 Convention really means. Because there is a lot of confusion, and I would maybe correct myself and not saying only confusion, but a lot of misinformation until, I would say, write out misinformation campaigns. So that's also part of what is ahead of UNHCR, to engage in not only more agile organization, but also to be able to counter some of the narratives. I think that will be extremely important. And UNHCR, a High Commissioner, can also not shy away from difficult aspects of his work or her work and the mandate. And we know that many important countries over the last years, especially the last years, very recent period of time, has engaged in sometimes very controversial and problematic practices. And I do think it is an obligation to talk with those governments, to give legal advice, but also to have a clear guidance and a clear public line of what is permissible under the 51 Convention and what is not acceptable. And that kind of work, I believe, can also make clear, maybe also to governments who are skeptical, to politicians who are skeptical towards the 51 Convention, that UNHCR can be of help for them as well. So that they understand that a functioning UNHCR is of importance to maintain stability in their own neighborhood. I do think that this is grossly underestimated. And we see that funding crisis, we have a smaller organization already. We have dramatically less humanitarian and development funding. And in a very short period of time, we have not seen the real consequences, the entire picture of what that means, if we don't work against that. Including, I am convinced, those leaders who have taken some of those decisions are not completely aware about the consequences. And I'm sure that in 2 or 3 years' time, we will have a different discussion and people will asking us, what have you been doing in that critical period to maintain a global protection regime, a humanitarian system that delivers, and a basic set of human values.
Mr. Crentsil, I'll go to you next.
Okay, let me start by saying that I would be very open to discussions, and I wouldn't want to gag anyone. The 1951 Convention is key. I mean, that is the foundation of refugee protection, so it has to be protected. That said, we should also be open to dialogue. After all, it is through these dialogues that it was found necessary to come up with the 1967 protocol, because the 51 Convention may not have covered all areas. It is through such dialogues that we had the OAU Convention also coming in to supplement certain aspects of the 51 Convention which did not address the situation in other places. It is through such dialogues that we had the Cartagena Declaration in 1984. So it's healthy to be open to dialogue. First. But secondly, even the 51 Convention, there were many states who already expressed reservations then. It was not fully accepted by everybody, even at that time. Secondly, the conditions have changed since 1951 up to now. So we have to be open to discussions and see what we can all agree and do well. And also to recall that the US is not party to the 1951 Convention, even though it ratified the 1967 protocol. And then, through that ratification, many articles, from Article 2 to 34 of the 51 Convention, were incorporated in US law. So such discussions are always unnecessary. Now let me talk about the Global Compact on Refugees. You know, the Global Compact on Refugees is not binding, legally binding. It's a set of principles, guidelines to help countries manage better the refugee situation. That said, you see, we don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater. If there are certain aspects of the Global Compact that would not, that some states may not be comfortable with, there are four main pillars of this. The first pillar is to reduce the burden on host communities. Second, also to ensure that conditions in countries of origin are conducive for return. And then self-reliance also. And then third country solutions, resettlement. If a country is not comfortable with any one of these basic pillars of the Global Compact on Refugees, we need to discuss. What about the others? Can they leverage the others? Well, already the US, for example, even though it's not party to the 1951 Convention, it has been the biggest donor to the refugee program. So there's a chance for dialogue to see that these concerns that they are raising are addressed in the context of today. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want a follow-up question. They were, under previous administrations, always a donor, despite not having signed to the 51 Convention, but the optional protocol. In this climate that we're in, and with this administration, and in light of the kind of conversations that are taking place about restricting severely access to asylum, how do you think UNHCR can respond to some of those challenges that are being put on the table around, for example, the first country, the third country agreements, and severely limiting the asylum, including the nature of it? Of course, it's in theory temporary, but we know that unless the conditions in the home country are such that there can be voluntary return, temporary is protracted in many cases. What kind of discussions do you think are possible in that context of this administration?
Yes, it's useful to also be mindful of what the constituents are saying. Granting of asylum is a prerogative of nations. It's not UNHCR's prerogative to grant asylum. So even resettlement programs is the prerogative. Durable solutions like local integration and resettlement are the prerogative of sovereign states. So what are the constituents of these sovereign states saying? First of all, we have to listen to them. All that I'm saying is that the 1951 Convention is a pillar. It has to be defended. But then we should also be open to dialogue, taking into consideration the fact that the constituents of member states may be having a different view. And definitely there will be pressure on the politicians to discuss this. And I'm ready to sit and discuss. And then if there are any areas of concern that can be fixed, we agree and fix them. All I'm saying is that we should not close our minds to open and very frank dialogue.
Thank you. Over to you, Mayor Hidalgo.
Thank you so much. About the bad narrative and the hostile narrative, I know because as mayor I had to fight against a lot of lobbies and hostile narrative. I can say it's my daily life as an ecologist, humanist, progressist mayor, as a woman and as a migrant. But I'm very optimistic, you know, because I know that alone it is impossible to achieve anything, but together with big coalition, with goodwill stakeholders and decision makers, we can change the game, and we have to change the game. Be very firm on the principle and about the convention, about the global government for refugees, but pragmatic and very creative in the method we have to launch and to implement now. Let me take one example. In 2015, we welcomed in Paris refugees from Syria, like in other countries in Europe, Afghanistan, Sudan, fleeing war. And we changed the feeling of public opinion. How? Working with a coalition made of NGOs, non-profit organizations, religious leaders in Paris, and thanks to this work, we hosted thousands of refugees in a special venue established by us. More than 500 citizens came every day to work as volunteers in this venue. We call this venue La Bulle, the bubble. And we changed the bad narrative. It was not so easy, you know, because a lot of people say to me, Madam Mayor, it's impossible. I remember my government, my colleagues in the French government said to me, you know, the public opinion is not so happy with this crisis. But we changed the narrative. And we changed the narrative, involve the citizens, the people, and all the stakeholders with the determination to change this narrative. And I think also that if we want, and we want to change these bad narratives, we need to succeed in the integration of refugees by hosting country. How? Of course, working with states, you say that before, on their legal framework, on integration, by education, especially for children, and labor, especially for women. Secondly, I want to work because they can change the narrative on the camp issues. With UN Habitat, with my fellow mayors, member of C40 network of mayors, with all these people working about cities, we are now ready to be part of a new approach for refugees and to change the camps into the city. For example, in Kenya is a very generous country. And we have to transform the camp into cities with the refugees themselves, of course, with the refugees themselves, with hosting community around the camps also, with all the actors of urban development, with NGOs, philanthropies involved in education and empowerment of women. If we succeed on that, trust me, we will definitively change the narrative.
And over to you, Ms. Do you want me to repeat the question? It's been a while since we started.
It's okay. No, about the hostile situation. No, I would be very principled because if the High Commissioner is not principled, who else? So I would be very clear on this. And then, as a lawyer of international law, I know that it's very dangerous to open a convention for discussion, and therefore we should concentrate on maybe to find solutions through the interpretation, and that was already possible for the IDPs. There was the guiding principles for IDPs in the UNHCR built in 1998, and it works. And that was, I think it was a result from Sadako Ogata, and so we have to interpret. But clearly I know how difficult it is, the climate in the countries, and I went through this the last 3 years. I was responsible for any decision in Switzerland on migration and refugees, and I faced personally how difficult it is. So I would have the experience, but also the understanding of other countries, to talk with them, to have a dialogue. You can also say everything behind closed door that I learned as a mediator. I was 5 years mediator in Thailand and 4 years in Myanmar, and finding solution also on the ground. Like I took a decision as the Secretary of State that all Afghan women just receive asylum in Switzerland. That was, I could make this decision in my capacity as a Secretary of State, also by law, but I was hugely criticized by the parliament, by the right-wing people, and I was firm. I said, no, this was the right decision because it's a principle that non-refoulement which we have to accept. And therefore, there are several principles we have to take care, and in other things we can be finding durable solution, but also the integration of the refugees is a tool which enhances the acceptance in the society, because then they contribute also to the society. If they have work, if they contribute to the society, then they are much more accepted. But clearly we have to invest in that. In Switzerland, I could give $20,000 per refugee to the cantons, that he could be during 6 and 7 years be integrated, learning the language, finding a work. So we would need money, but also to talk with the member states to explain them that it's in their interest to integrate the refugees.
And I'm just going to ask one more question before I open up to the audience. So this is your cue to start thinking about your questions as we're slowly getting there. With international humanitarian aid declining and severe budget constraints, refugee communities and local actors are often the first responders in crisis and have been for a long time. Yet only 1.2% of humanitarian funding, and the estimates are perhaps less than even 0.01% to refugee-led organizations reach them. As High Commissioner, what concrete steps will you take to shift power and resources toward refugee-led organizations and local actors, advancing the localization agenda in ways that ensure protection and assistance and are sustainable, impactful, and responsive to the real needs? For this round of questions, I'm going to give you 3 minutes each before we open up to the audience, and I will start with Madame Maire.
Yes. Of course, I want to increase the resources of the country-based pooled funds. It's essential to empower refugee-led NGOs. I will work with also OCHA to meet this goal, because OCHA is leading the coordination. And I know that the target of 25% of the amount of humanitarian funds to local NGOs, including refugee-led organizations, need to be achieved. And I know also that and it is my experience as a mayor of Paris that decentralization and localization are the single way to be efficient. We need to be very in the cooperation with the level of the agencies of UN, OCHA, leading the humanitarian coordination, but also I talk about UN Habitat. I think UN Habitat is very important in the issue of the transformation of the camps. Other agencies, the IOM is also very important in the coordination and the cooperation. We have to work with the head of state, and for me, in all this goal, including the increasing of the resources of the NGOs, we have to organize a group of avant-garde. I want to organize a group of avant-garde with head of states, stakeholders, foundation, NGOs, and also with mayors, because I'm mayor. I know what the mayor are doing every day about hosting the refugees when the crisis came, but every day about the integration of all the communities, all the people fleeing wars and situation, very bad situation. And I know that we need to have this new coalition, and with this new coalition and this group of avant-garde, we can access and achieve to all this goal and implement the convention for refugee, because all the tools are in this document, in this very important document. Thank you.
And maybe we'll go back this way.
Yes, okay. For me, it was always very important to work and to listen to the refugees, but also NGOs. If I look back in my career, I also was once in the lead of to build the convention on the cluster munition, and I worked very closely with the cluster munition coalition, and it helped me because the NGOs have the knowledge, and also the refugees, they know exactly what they went through. So as a Secretary of State on migration, I had a lot of refugees in my team. I had all together 1,650 staff, and I had a lot of refugees. And like my legal advisor in my team, so very close to me, was a refugee from Sri Lanka, Lavanya Siradurai, and she was excellent. And she helped me a lot to understand what is the condition when they are arriving in Switzerland, what they wish and how we can integrate them. So for me, it's important also, if I get the UNHCR, to integrate refugees in the work, and I would try to measure it. So in the different entities, I would make goals for the staff and the leaders of the different divisions to reach a percentage of participation. And only if you can measure it, it's like with the gender balance. I was always for quotas, because you in the beginning you need some measures that we can enhance this voice. So for me, it was always important to listen to the refugees, and I would like to do this also in the future.
Mr. Annen?
Yes, thank you. The first point I wanted to mention is in that discussion, we should not forget that the preferred solution still should be voluntary and dignified and safe return. And there UNHCR has a big role to play. And we all know conditions are very difficult, but there are also some glimmers of hope. And I think we see that in Syria, for example, where people are going back and where UNHCR has an important role to play. But if return is not an option, then I think the answer of your question depends very much on the situation on the ground. If there's a very difficult environment, protection should be the center. And protection is then the responsibility of UNHCR. And of course, refugees will always play a role. But I think if you have a condition where local integration is an option, and I, as the State Secretary, have been working, including with UNHCR in the last years, also on the question of mobilizing development money for sustainable solutions. That is where refugees, at the end of the day, will be able, and there are very encouraging examples already existing, to build a business. When we have generous governments that are open their social systems, their education systems, if UNHCR, together also with refugee-led organization, and I say not only organizations, but refugee-led companies, refugees who are economically successful, raising money, creating the condition for sustainable solution integration. That is going to be, I think, something that I, as High Commissioner, if selected, would be very much supporting. And what we are seeing right now is, and I want to name that because at UNGA we're discussing about UN80 and the question what the United Nations will do in this situation and how the reform will be implemented. And there's a natural tendency under political and economic pressure to somehow come back to the old silos. And we need to make sure that the humanitarian and the development pillars, especially when it comes to solutions for refugees, are working together and are not going to be separated again in different organization, logics, and silos.
Over to you, Mr. Crentsil.
Yes, asking me this question is like preaching to the converted, because it is something I have done, and I'm proud to say this, that last year I signed 32 grant agreements with refugee-led organizations in Uganda, by far the highest in the whole organization, because I find value in it. And by doing this and other efficiency gains, I produced a paper on efficiencies which was circulated in UNHCR as a global example on efficiencies. Working through the RLOs, the grants are not that big. Little grants, outreach programs, in health, in protection, innovation, and other areas has been proved to be very, very useful. And it's something that I preach, that all operations in UNHCR should consider doing that, because refugees are there with their own people. And by the way, when you talk of refugee-led organizations, it's not only, it's said refugee-led, but the membership often are both nationals also. But we must continue along this line. But there are certain barriers to expanding this scheme of doing business, and that is to facilitate registration of some of these refugee-led organizations is key, so that administrative barriers are removed, so that we can expand that. Offering financial literacy to the refugee-led organizations is also key, because from my experience, we signed with many of them. Some of them did extremely well, others did not do so well because of lack of that expertise. So the risk of using refugee-led organizations that are not skilled in financial literacy can also be high. I'm talking of efficiency and judicious use of resources. So these are all areas that we must look at, but the idea of working with refugee-led organizations is fundamental. And like I said, I have done it. I've done it. It is known, the records are there, that no operation in UNHCR has signed so many partnership agreements or grant agreements with refugee-led organizations.
Okay, and now I'm going to open to the audience to ask questions, and I'm going to do this very democratically and transparently. The first person who raises their hand and I lay eyes on. So, please stand up.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Deko Sirat. I am a former refugee.
There's a microphone coming, yeah.
My name is Deko Segar. I'm originally from Somalia. I grew up in the Dadaab refugee camp. My question is probably twofold, if not three. The first question is, how will you handle when temporary settlement or refugee camps became a permanent settlement? What will you do about that? Because in the Dadaab today, we have fourth generation people that have never lived outside the camp. The second thing that I would like to ask is, today we have almost 124 million people displaced, many of them that are registered as refugees. If refugees were given the opportunity to vote for you guys instead of the General Assembly, why would they select you?
Okay, and why don't we start from the middle again and then go. Mr. Annen, go ahead.
No, thank you. I mean, as you know, this is not a campaign event because it's not an election. And I was a member of parliament for 15 years in a big city. And so when starting with 2015, many people, especially from Syria, came to my city. it was a very important impression that I got and experienced in working with the local communities, explaining to them that there's a need now to host people who did not speak German, in many cases did not, share the religion, came from a very different background. And I think that it's maybe something that I can bring if selected, not elected, but selected as High Commissioner, that yes, Germany is a prosperous country, but over the last years and decades, we had a lot of experience. I had a lot of experience in working with local communities, working with refugee-led organizations. And if I look at the result, has it been perfect? Of course not. But we have 800,000 Syrians in Germany, and more than 250,000 are now German citizens. They have been open businesses. They are working as doctors, as teachers, as nurses, and all kinds of professions. Some of them have been top in their class, came to school without a word of German. And we also know about the difficulties for communities, and there have been strains to that. I think I learned from my time as the Deputy Foreign Minister and the Deputy Development Minister to bring the different instruments together. So it's not a theory for me. And I think that is something that I would tell those people if the General Assembly would vote, but they are not voting. So in telling you so much, I think I forgot the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
It was about protracted situations, generations of people.
I think my time is up, but just very briefly, I mean, the sustainable solution that I talked about must be a part of the solution. Because to having protected situation over generations and generations, people born and raised in refugee camps is not a solution. And by the way, also humanitarian funding is not, that's not the idea, and it cannot be sustained because the funds are running out. So I think more and more also host countries are understanding that also for them, if UNHCR is running out of money, if the camp management, if the facilities are not being entertained anymore, it puts a lot of pressure on it. So that's why I believe that the sustainable response is so important. And there are very encouraging examples in Uganda and Kenya and other parts of the of refugee situations. And I think that's where we need to learn from and need to act.
Go ahead.
Yes, first of all about the camps. I think we have to finish with the camps as solution. Is a solution for the emergency, but not a sustainable solution. You talk about fourth generation. It's impossible to imagine children in these camps and the future of these children and the father and the grandfather in the same situation since 20, 30 years. It's impossible to explain today that there can be a solution. I want to bring my experience as mayor, as urban planner, as leader with all my colleagues, mayors around the world in the networks. And I think that we have to change the camp to cities, and for that we need to work with the citizens, have a participatory organization, give the voice, the choices to the people in the camp, and work not just with the people in the camp, but with all the urban planners, designer, architect, people who want to help to change this situation. If we do that, I think that we change for a long time the narrative, the implication. We can, with this new approach I propose, have also new donors. We can have new donors. And in my idea, I think that, for example, two very vulnerable groups, children and women. We have to implement programs, but not just for the refugees in the camp, also for the most vulnerable people, children and women around the camps. And I think with program about the transformation of the camps into cities, and also with program sharing solution for the hosting country and communities, and also the refugee, we can change the game. I think today when I talk about that, a lot of people want to come with us and change that. Just one word about integration, participation of the refugees in all the process about decision making. In Paris, we have a lot of initiative. For example, I did invent ID for all the residents of the city. And this ID, this card, give right to these people, right to participate. They are not French people, of course, but they are residents, inhabitants in the city. And with this card, they can participate. I think we can bring all the innovation, social innovation, by cities, by countries, with the group, this group of avant-garde, and we can also change the game about the participation and the integration of refugees in decision making.
Go ahead. Yes, on camps, clearly that would be one of my priority to close the camps. But clearly, if we want to close them, we need a conducive situation on the ground. I had so many discussions with people in camps, like in Cox's Bazar, where more than 1 million Rohingyas are living, and all told me always that they want to go home to Rakhine in Myanmar, but clearly with dignity and safety. And that's the reason we have to invest much more on the ground to build on the social cohesion, because that was the problem in Rakhine. And I organized for more than 2 years social cohesion programs on the ground with especially young people to bring them together, Buddhist and Muslim people. And with the time, we could bring them together. And they were open also to take them back in Rakhine. And for that reason, you have to talk with the refugees and to find out under what conditions they want to go back. And then you have to assist them. But clearly in Rakhine, I would once again talk now with the one who is responsible now in Rakhine, is the Arakan army. And you have to have diplomatic and mediation skills to find solutions on the ground. But camps are really not for a longer time, and I wouldn't like to see any new camps because in Cox's Bazar I also saw in the beginning that even the children didn't get education, and that showed me also that it's important to have this synergy of the different entities in the UN, because UNICEF was for the education, but they were not allowed to give education. So I talked to the government in Bangladesh and convinced them that we can have the curriculum for Myanmar. So sometimes you have to invent new ideas, that you fill the gap until they can go back, that they don't have a gap of education. But clearly, otherwise, the outside the camps, people who are traveling, they need to be integrated. And for camp solutions, I would also try to convince much more member states for resettlement. I'm a big fan of resettlement because it's a safe pathway to another country. And this is also what we have as the High Commissioner to do, to convince the member states to take more of them.
Do you want to answer this question?
Let me say this, that to close a camp, there are certain elements that one has to consider in a protracted refugee situation. First, are the refugees there integrated? And by integration, I'm talking of economic integration, social integration, and legal integration. Oftentimes, when they stay for a long time, they are socially integrated. But then the legal aspect of integration has not been satisfied. And I'll cite you an example of what happened in Tanzania 2010, 2011, when Tanzania naturalized 162 Burundian refugees who had been there since the early 70s there. That was a landmark. No country has ever done that. So, legal integration is key to closing any protracted refugee situation. So what do? Work with the government to ensure that this is achieved. When this happened in Tanzania, I was then a senior desk officer at headquarters covering Tanzania, so I was very much involved in this. So legal integration is key. Secondly, if you are going to close the camps, the land tenure system, you ask the question about what happens to the camp. The land tenure system, in the first place, who own the land? It depends on the land tenure system in the country. There are certain countries whereby the land is owned by communities. Would communities allow that refugees, even though they have stayed there for a long time, would they remain there? That becomes very contentious. So, local integration as a durable solution is prerequisite for this to happen, or voluntary repatriation if refugees' conditions in their countries are conducive for them to return. I asked about refugees. What would refugees want to see most? I think an empowered refugee is the answer. In fact, an empowered refugee answers many of the financial problems that we are talking about. We get money to implement social protection, to implement many activities in health, education, water, and so on for refugees, gratis. If they are empowered, they will be able to fund these activities themselves, just like many citizens do. So ensuring that refugees are empowered is key to making sure that you can close some of these chapters.
Okay, and I will take some more questions, and I saw hands first in the back. I ask you to keep your questions one-fold, and also if you would like to ask a particular candidate, maybe that would also be an option with time. And just a reminder that we are over time, and I understand that you all are very interested in this conversation, so I will keep it going a little bit more and then go to the reception and drinks where we continue over food. So the first question is at the back, Lord Mayor.
Hi, how are you doing? So my name's Marvin Rees. I was the Mayor of Bristol in the UK, and I was a founding member of the Mayor's Migration Council, and I'm still a member of that now, which is a network of mayors around the world trying to bring some common sense to the way we deal with migration. But 70% of displaced people now live in cities, not camps, and yet only 1.2% of humanitarian funding reaches that local level. And as a mayor, I can say we tried to deal with the pressures of immigration so we could access the benefits of migration without much support in doing so. I would like to ask all the panels, if you were to take on the role of High Commissioner for an agency facing severe budget constraints, what concrete steps would you take to advance the localization agenda?
Any takers to answer it first? You reached for your mic, so I took it as a sign.
I leave it for you.
Go ahead.
No, look, I think it's a very important point you're raising, and German Development Corporation has been supporting, for example, Syrian refugees not only in the big camps in Jordan, but also in the city, in East Amman especially, giving them access to services and to education and grant funding to build their own businesses. I think I would build on that experience and another experience that I believe has been very helpful. We have been giving some funds from our development cooperation portfolio to the availability of cities. Because what we saw is, especially when the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine happened, we somehow saw that cities, local communities had established partnerships with Ukrainian cities and local communities. And so we were giving them some funds and money to help them and their partner communities to deal, for example, with the huge pressure of IDPs and hosting people there. So especially in times of scarce resources, I do think that the networks that cities and communities have built, if supported, could be very helpful and very important. And it is true that in most places, people are not only living in camps, but they live in cities. And they have difficulties to reach access and support. And we have been working with our partners for many, many years in very different theaters. And so I would build on that. And I think you raised a very important question here. And it would also open up the network that UNHCR needs to address the current challenges.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think about the climate change issue. The cities today are part of the discussion, the table, and the solution. Why? Because we are facing, as mayor with our citizens, we are facing all the crises and climate crisis, but when we need to face and to welcome, to host refugees, the mayors are on the first line with the NGOs. We are in the same position, NGOs and mayors in the city when we are to face a crisis. A lot of time without the states, because the state came after the crisis, and the solution are finding by the local level and the local government. As mayor of Paris, I'm member of many coalition and network of mayors. One is ICORN. ICORN is a network dedicated to refugees, artists, journalists, and we host these people in our city and other cities with integration, with all what we can do together with the community to integrate and give the opportunity to these refugees. We are also part since 2015. I remember the Pope Francisco organized in the Vatican each year, and I was a member of this work, each year work with mayors around Europe when we're facing the crisis about Syria in Europe, and we work together, mayors in the Vatican, to find and to share the solution, because it was we were the actor with the NGOs, the key actors of this crisis. I think that about climate change, where now the mayors are on the table, include the table of the COP and the organization of the COP and the negotiation of the convention, international convention, and we were all the mayors and our network in Rio and in Belen. For the climate issues, we need to enlarge the coalition with the mayor in the table, because with the mayor we have the NGOs and we can have the refugees, because we can better integrate in our cities the refugees. And I think it's the way I want to bring this experience if I become a High Commissioner.
Mr. Crentsil, go ahead.
Let me see that. I mean, where you find many refugees living in urban centers, it points to something. It means that country has a freedom of movement policy. In many of the countries where we have huge numbers of refugees, this is not the case. Refugees are encamped, and such that they are not even allowed. Some of them are not allowed to live out of the camps. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have refugees living in urban areas. But what happens is that many a time, because they are living in urban areas, focus on them is often lost because they are supposed to be like everybody else in the urban area. In some of the countries that we work in, and in particular, I mean, I'm talking of the example of Uganda, where I am now, recognizing this fact that refugees living in urban areas would have their own specific issues. We are in the process of even signing a memorandum of understanding with the Kampala City Council Authority to make sure that programs, UNHCR's programs, also take into consideration requirements and needs in urban areas as well. So, as much as possible, it is encouraged, the freedom of movement is encouraged, refugees will live in urban areas, but then they would face certain conditions that UNHCR and partners would have to, make sure that they address. For example, access to justice for urban refugees is often an issue because oftentimes nobody really takes charge of that. And with dwindling resources, that is not an area that is prioritized. So I would prioritize that and help the city councils as much as possible to manage refugees who choose to live in urban areas.
Yeah, it was exactly my experience as a Secretary of State on Migration that the cities were normally or generally more generous towards the reception of refugees. And I was called several times by city mayors and they said, we have still space, please send us refugees. And therefore I was happy to hear that there is already an MOU between UNHCR and the mayor migration coalition, and I think now it's on a time that the coordinations should start much more concrete. I think about why not resettlement cases for such cities, because with the resettlement you have time to plan because you choose them. I was several times with my delegation from my team to Istanbul or Cairo, and we choose the most vulnerable people and we brought them safely to Switzerland, and that you can plan. So I could see that is a future to work with the mayor's migration coalition.
Wonderful. And I have seen so many hands go up, but I'm also getting eyes from organizers about the timing of it. We have gone over. And so I want to bring this to a close. But before doing that, I want to take the time to sincerely thank each of you for being here tonight, for giving your time, for your interest in running for this position for the next High Commissioner for Refugees at a time when it is probably the most challenging, as many of us in the room would have seen, the position that UNHCR is in. So some may be even be asking, why would you want this job right now? But I thank you sincerely for your time, and I thank the audience for their engagement, their interest. And from all the hands going up, what I get a sense of is that there should be another one. And since the official closing date of the candidate process is October 6th, and we know that there are other candidates that have just announced some this week, and we're not able to make it, and other candidates that may come forward. We'll put it there just as a question mark potential about something after the close date. But for now, we've got a token of our appreciation for each of you, which is a piece of art made by a refugee artist with the animal of your country. So something very different and exciting, we hope. I want to thank the audience for your engagement. You could open it and show the audience. And I do want to take the time to also thank all the members of, show them please, yes, it's very exciting. Members of the organizers, Our Space, Our Seats, Refugees International, Solberg Institute, and who am I missing here? The United States Refugee Advisory Board, Hilton, Porticus, Bosch. I'm doing the background like the ad, just thanking all the sponsors while you look at this. If I forget anybody. Did I forget anybody? I don't think I did. Of course, Hudia. A special thank you for everything you've done during this time.